Eliza Johnson, and I'm going to talk about my book with my dad, Jerry Johnson.
Alright, what's the book you read this time?
Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte.
Okay. And what's the book about?
So, I'm going to make this as brief as possible, but it's a very complicated book. So, I'll just start by telling you that mostly the narrator of this story was Nellie Dean, which is a housemaid from Wuthering Heights, which is one of the houses I'm about to talk to you about. So, there are 3 children in the beginning of the story, and that is Catherine and Hindley, who are brother and sister, and Heathcliff, which was a child adopted into that family, and there's another family involved, which are the Lintons that live at Thrushcross Grange, Edgar Linton and Isabella Linton. And so Hindley likes to pick on Heathcliff a lot when they were younger, but Catherine and Heathcliff fell in love, and they were in love until their adulthood. And so that's made up for about half of the novel. And then, so Catherine is away for a while, and she eventually falls in love with Edgar Linton, and so they get married, and then after a while, Heathcliff and Isabella Linton get married, but Isabella hates Heathcliff because he treats her very poorly. And then soon, a few of the characters die, and that would be Catherine, Hindley, and Isabella after they all have their children. So Catherine has Catherine as her child, Isabella and Heathcliff have Linton as their child, and Hindley has Hareton as his child, but Hindley had his a while before Catherine and Linton. So after they had their children, and after those few characters died, it starts talking about the relationships between the children. So Heathcliff and Edgar Linton are the only ones left that are the adults, except for Nellie, who's the narrator, and she's observing all of this. And so Heathcliff's trying to get Catherine and Linton to be married because he wants to take over Thrushcross Grange because he already owns Wuthering Heights since Hindley died, and he owned it. So
Wuthering Heights is a town or a house?
Yes, Wuthering Heights is a house, which Hindley owned, except for he died, so now Heathcliff owns it.
Okay. Is it like a mansion or something? I mean, it sounds like it would be. I don't know.
Yes, from the descriptions, I think it would be a mansion.
Okay, what were the descriptions that might lead you to that belief?
They're just, like, I don't know, from the descriptions that the author gives, it just seems very epic and wide and very elegant.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So is there any themes in this book that kind of go out throughout the book?
I thought one of the biggest themes was like a revenge theme, and I got that a lot from Heathcliff because he was picked on as a child from Hindley, so he was trying to get back at Hindley, and also revenge at Edgar because Edgar married the love of his life. And so I'm going to pick up a quote about the revenge theme. So Nellie, as I told you, was the narrator, and she's trying to tell Heathcliff not to get into this revenge. She says, "It is for God to punish wicked people. We should learn to forgive." And Heathcliff says, "No, God won't have the satisfaction that I shall." So you can see that Heathcliff just has that fire in him, and he just wants to fight for what he wants.
Okay. And then, is there any, does this book remind you of another book, maybe? Like a text-to-text connection?
I tried to connect the book to Jane Eyre because the authors of those 2 books are sisters, and so I thought there may be some similarities between the two. They come from the same family, they probably went through a few of the same experiences, and they're both written in the same time period, so I'm sure there was some similarities between them. And I mean, I picked up a little bit because they're both very romantic, but they're of completely different ideas. And I just picked out mostly the scenery in them, like the houses and the nature, and that's about it.
Okay. Is there anything you found most interesting in this book that kept your interest?
I thought it was very interesting how the book was set up, especially with the narrators, which was really confusing to me. I mean, I disliked it, but it was interesting. So the book began with a man named Mr. Lockwood, who has nothing to do with anything in the novel, but he, after all those events took place, he ended up owning Thrushcross Grange, and Mr. Heathcliff was his landlord because Heathcliff ended up owning Thrushcross Grange. So we hear the story from Mr. Lockwood for a little bit, but then Mr. Lockwood meets with Nellie, who I told you about, and so Nellie talks to Lockwood about the story of all the events.
Okay.
So most of the book is told from Nellie's point of view because Nellie was taking place and all of that. And then at the end it goes back to Mr. Lockwood, and it's just very confusing. But it was interesting how that was set up.
So the point of view.
Yeah, the point of view.
Okay. So is there anything else, like any quotes that you found more interesting that would lead, that support like the author's purpose to write it or anything like that? Or the author's style?
I thought Emily's style was interesting in the way that she wanted the reader to keep up with the characters, because as I told you the whole summary, there's multiple characters in the book, so what I liked about her writing is that she talked about the characters with different nicknames. So, like, when talking about the older Catherine, not the one Catherine had as a child, she would say, like, Catherine or Kathy or Mrs. Linton, so you would be reminded as to who the character is. And that goes for all the characters as well.
Okay. What do you think was the purpose behind her writing this?
I think she was trying to get the point across that you should fight for who you love, because Heathcliff obviously showed that very well. He just wanted to get Catherine's love, and so he fought for that. And also, the younger Catherine, Catherine's child, fought for her love by betraying her father's wants and continuing to see the boys that she loved. First Linton, but then he died, and so she began to love Hareton, Hindley's child, and so she was fighting for that love as well.
So how do you keep track of all these different characters? Seems difficult.
Well, as I told you, the author gave many nicknames, so I was able to keep track through that, and then I just had to remember back to the events that I heard before, and that's how I would remember who the characters were.
Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to share from the story?
I recognize that Heathcliff was a very hated character, and I think that has to do with his want for revenge, and so he was just very unliked.
So Bronte does a good job developing the characters.
Yes, she does. And so he was very hated by his wife, who asks Nellie, "Is Mr. Heathcliff a man? If so, is he mad? And if not, is he a devil?" So obviously people are questioning his morals and how he acts in the world. He's not really a regular person. And she also says that he's not a human being. And so that also has to go along with the quote that I just read. And I have a few more.
Who said that he's not a human being?
His wife.
Nice.
And near the end of the novel is when the children are being talked about. And so Linton, Heathcliff's son, even hates him. And the quote here is, Linton here started from his slumber in bewildered terror and asked if anyone had called his name. He thought his father called his name, and that's how he woke in terror, which I thought was very interesting in how he reacts to his name called by his father. And then also the younger Catherine, Catherine's child, she...
So Catherine had a Catherine?
Yes.
Nice.
She also hated Heathcliff, and Heathcliff was her uncle. And she says to him, "You are miserable, are you not? Lonely like the devil and envious like him? Nobody loves you. Nobody will cry for you when you die." So, all of the characters, except for Catherine, the one he was in love with, really disliked him for everything that he did.
Okay. Would you recommend this book to someone else reading it?
I think I would recommend this to someone who would be interested in 19th century novels, or like if they're interested in romance. I think this would be a good way to see where romance really started, because I think this is one of the most famous romance novels, although I didn't think it was all that great. This would be a good way to start.
On a scale of an A to an F, what would you give it?
Probably like a C+. I probably wouldn't want to really read it again or anything like that. And it was just very confusing to me, and I didn't really like the storyline too much, but it was alright.
Yeah. C+ isn't its average, huh?
Yeah.
A little above average book.
Yeah.
Alright, well thanks for sharing your story with me.
Thanks for talking with me.
Yep. You're welcome.